Welcome everyone to another video of mine, and today I bring forward a showcase of one of my Conlangs that I finally managed to finish somewhat, if you can call it that. And that language, of course, is Meraogguu, or Modern East Khatas. Now, what exactly is Meraogguu, other than being a Conlang of mine? Well, first off, it is a Darlang of Proto-Khatas, which, Khatas is more like a placeholder name. There is actually no reconstructed name of the language itself, other than a very inaccurate one. The language is mostly head initial. It also has a VSO word order. It is pretty much fusional in terms of conjugation, and it has a fairly difficult declension and conjugation system. First off, the language family tree. We start out with the proto-language, which splits off to the west into the proto-west language, which then splits into two to the north, east, and west. We also split off into another direction, which splits off onto Old East, which you can see it traverses a much longer time. And then, first off, there is Meraogguu, and there is also probably an extinct language called East Independent Khatas. It doesn't have an actual name since, well, it's extinct, but there are some proofs that it may exist. So let's talk about the phonology first. M, na, ng, ta, da, ka, ga, sa, va, ya, ra. Pretty easy. There's also the vowels I, U, O, E, A. Now, some things to be mentioned. N and ng are actually just allophones of m, which is why they're actually written the same. And d and g only appears preceding u. Now, they would count as allophones of t and k, but t and k can also appear in front of u, which to this day I have no clue how I managed to do. Fun fact about vowels, they are exactly the same as Old East Khatas's reconstructed vowels. So the vowel set somehow managed to stay the same even though it went to a bunch of changes. Now, other phonology and other related stuff. The maximum syllable structure is CC, as far as I see. The V may be any vowel, but it can also be R, N, M, and Ng as well, making them syllabic. Plosives go after fricatives, strictly if in conjugation they somehow manage to go or before fricatives, then they are metaphysized immediately. Now, romanization. Most consonants and vowels are the same. N and ng are shown as n, and e is shown with an e. Long vowels are shown by reduplication. Now, before we get into any conjugation, there are some things that must be mentioned. First off, some markings that I use. I'm not gonna read them out, you can pretty much just see them. And there is also something that we have to discuss from like the past of Meraogguu, which is very relevant. See, first off, noun classes. The proto language had 5 noun classes: animate and inanimate, and inside that, animate was split up into masculine and feminine, and inanimate was split into masculine, feminine, and neuter. Animate genders, well, they are kind of difficult to figure out, like what's the logic behind. It's theorized that it's technically like the masculine and feminine neuter distinction in inanimate, and there are also very nice little endings that told us the exact gender of the noun. However, in Meraogguu, any noun could just about be any gender, but only gender-wise. See, animacy was kept the exact same. If it breathes, if it has a heart that beats, then it's alive, otherwise it's not. Now, the proto-language also had vowel harmony. There were three categories: front, back, and neutral. So front was I, U, and A, back was U, A, and neutral was I, E, U, O, O. Now, obviously, neutral is the only one that can co-occur with front and back vowels. Front and back cannot mix, except in one case, if there was a word that was made out of 2 other words, they could mix. Now that we know some history about the language, here are some noun cases. Now I've put all the shortenings up in the top part, and you can see that the cells are sometimes split into two, like into halves. Well, that is again because the first one is when the word is normal, right? But the second one is if it contains an oo, which automatically makes it low. Also, here are the plurals. You can see that they're much more friendlier. That is because the animacy-based distinction stayed, however, the gender-wise distinction didn't. This is because in the plural language, it was a general practice that when you're conjugating in the plural, only take the masculine version of the select class, so animate or inanimate. Adjectives and adverbs, do they exist? Well, kind of, I guess. I mean, they don't have their own part of speech. They are formed using suffixes. However, these suffixes can be mixed. So, for example, kis can turn a verb into a noun, and s can turn a noun into a verb, which allows nouns and verbs to trade places. Very nice. Now, speaking of verbs, here is the conjugation table. Now, I know it's gigantic, but if you have a sharp eye, you can see that the imperfective and perfective conjugations are quite literally the same except for the present. But that is because verbs have two stems, non-perfective and perfective. Non-perfective is used for imperfective and habitual, while perfective is used for perfective. Now, this used to be simply just a reduplication. However, due to sound changes, most of the reduplicated stems are either the exact same or completely different from their original forms. And there's also verb modality. I mean, yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. Now, pronouns, there's a lot of them since every case has its own set of pronouns. And you can see that pronouns are split into this formal and informal system. However, a lot of times the third inanimate also fuses, but sometimes it just doesn't. Now, there are some cases where I would fuse it, however, they're separated by another cell, which I can't fuse into them. Either way, you can see that there are a lot of forms that look the exact same. Like, the genitive, causal, final, and instrumental all have keet, or they all have ot, or meest, or teed, though, well, genitive has tent, and causal, final, and instrumental have tet, but doesn't matter. Now about writing. The proto language has no actual proof of having a writing system, but it was very likely an alphabet long before it split up. Now, Old East itself had an alphabet, though a lot of words seem to be missing actual written proof, and it is likely suspected that it is off pronunciation. Now, Meraogguu also uses an alphabet for historical writing and some important parts of literature. However, they also ported their alphabet into the Latin alphabet, since they met us through interdimensional travel. This alphabet, either way, is nearly up to date with pronunciation, other than the k, g, and t, the pairs are being off since they're shown with the exact same character, and as well as m and its allophones. So let's look at it. First off, the consonant sounds. They are beautiful, and obviously the vowel sounds as well. Now, the present and future of Meraogguu. See, as much as it is nice to look into the past, we sometimes gotta think of the future. What will happen? What could happen? What would happen? First off, palatalization may occur. T going to ch, k going to ch, s going to sh, in some cases, of course, and there are other pairs that may get palatalized. Now, vowel shifts, there may be I mutation, or as the German speakers would call it, umlaut. There's long vowel shifts and diphthongization probably, and they may be also short vowel loss in some. Now, nuclei of syllables may change. Now, this is basically just losing r, n, m, and ng in places of vowels, or maybe entirely getting replaced or just getting changed a bit. Anything basically. And obviously some grammatical shifts. Dropping the perfective imperfect distinction is already something that's happening, Vocative case getting lost. Well, basically no one uses it other than writers. However, Meraogguu is also already experiencing these changes. See, the young speakers and new speakers and the kind of, fresh speakers started already palatalizing some consonants. It's much easier to pronounce, as well as some shortenings with long vowels and geminates, and stressed vowels may also shift. Now, speakers also started using the old character for h from the Old East, since k and g and also t and d were shown with the exact same characters. So how would you know the difference? Well, if it's a voice, you just put the h character after it. So for example, here's how you would write d and d, and here's how you would write g and g. Now, let's get some words and their possible successors as well as their ancestors. I've put some markings there, and also you can see the words in English on the left. So first off, the modern words. Útos, métek, skútos, tiamas or tia, kemmes, stekat, meraogguu. Something has to be mentioned. Kemmes and stekat are sometimes pronounced kimmes and stekat because a lot of times long vowels, long e shifts to e, and stressed e also shifts to e. Now, one step back, we arrive at Old East. Fortom sassa, maakotetintik, usuttokotot, tiamat, keintamet, saktarkatmim, mermoitaktiskom. As you can see, some words like Ortom, Sassa, and Tiamat have written record, so they don't have the literal asterisk next to them. Now, even one step further back, we see the proto-language. And excuse me, but these are gonna take a lot of effort to pronounce. Ordom Sassa, Maakutetimtike, Usuttokaudat, Tiamta, Keindante, Sakdarkatmu, Wermauidachtiskame. And finally, the future of Meraogguu. Well, ignore the typo. So, obviously, we have Udos, Wetech, Usgudot, Chames or Che, Chimmes, Stjekum, Meraogguu. Now, what is happening with this t and k? Why are they still there? Why aren't they d and g? Well, the first one is a very simple one. It's actually just the geminate t that actually lost its gemination after the intervocalic voicing. And about the k, well, the k didn't really go through intervocalic voicing. It kind of just either turned into a more devoiced k sound, or it turned into a h that kind of depends on each person. So some pronounce it like k, some pronounce it like h. So it's basically just getting weaker. Now, why did that s develop into a t and the t into a m in those two words? Well, let's look back on those words. See, in their conjugated form, the endings were kept actually fairly decently. Tot reduced to only t and mim reduced to m. However, in the uninflected form, the word final t went to a s and the mim entirely disappeared. However, in the future, this would also happen with apparently having usgüdos and stjekat. However, since many speakers are actually confusing the conjugation form and base form of words, it is very likely that they're going to discard the base form and replace it with the conjugation form, essentially irregularly, like developing a new base form to them. This also applies to some nouns, some other verbs, so this is not just only these two words. So back to our chart, we can see that I kind of put two asterisks at the name of the language in Old East. Well, this is because it is very likely that at this point it may have been one word, but it also may have been two words that then fused together, meaning it's not entirely accurate. And that is the same deal with the proto version, since a lot of vowels are mixing which shouldn't, and yeah, which just points to the fact that it's supposed to be multiple words. So, and also about some vowel stuff, which is exactly why Old East is terrible, and the entire East part of the language is terrible, because this is how the vowels fused, which on its own is not bad. If it wasn't for A merging into O, you know, the only vowel that is supposed to be back merging into a neutral, and also A, which doesn't even have a category at this point, merging into, well, A. Now, there are also some hypothesized merges, which, well, are mostly just a theory that isn't real proof, but some people are suspecting with why some words are so weird. Either way, this is the final chart for the words. Now, obviously, the spoken sample. I'm going to show you the entire showcase in English first, then in the modern East, which is going to be Latinized, and there's obviously going to be glows with both. Now, here's the English version. I'm not going to read it out, it's just simply a conversation between three friends, John, Alex, and Matthew. Now, here it is in Meraogguu. You can see that it's pretty funny to look at, especially with a T with like an accent mark, but you'll get used to it. Either way, it is time to actually read out the entire sample. First off, the names, obviously, before we actually get into some hard reading. This is Joam, or John. This is Aresk, or Alex, sorry. And this is Matev, or Matthew. So, let's start. Kogu mäekkoärtäkiit. Okkote jo ruijo. Tai jos osuuski kikkiist. Tiamas kiarri. Okokos mässi. Iveskuki duusis jeksi jomutu kuumisaresk tosentee. Emafstis kaskeosus koote easri. Tov guuroki irassi. Tiatja. Mateais määttek okkuus kuurte easri. Tai josis kiirri. Tiamaski. Well, that was the spoken sample. And to be honest, thank you for watching. This was the entire showcase, or as they would say it, osuuski tiissi ussuuskiistuu.